For Sunday, June 19th, you found the Georgia gang. Topping our agenda, the war on terror roils the political landscape. Water wars ignite again in Washington, D.C. In Atlanta, the streetcar will run for a couple of weeks, maybe not. Some of the stories up for grabs. The Georgia gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia gang starts now.
And we're glad you could be with us on this hot Sunday in June in Atlanta. This was a terrible week for the nation, of course, with a tragic, horrible terrorist attack in Orlando, Florida. That'll be discussed on all the broadcasts this morning, but we need to look at it from a Georgia perspective. And already a division has arisen between how Democrats in Georgia and Republicans in Georgia are going to approach this. And Matt, Johnny Isakson, by the way, glad you're with us, Matt.
Thank you.
Johnny Isakson said, he had a meeting with the AJC, and he said, let's kill the terrorists. Just blunt, take it out.
Yeah.
Take them out and shoot them, as they say.
Yep. And it's interesting because we are getting different takes. His opponent, in essence, said, blame us, the American people, which I found rather shocking. More shocking is it didn't get more press coverage. Isakson is talking tough because right now that's what he's inclined to do. I think he really feels that way, and I think he's reflecting a lot of people in Congress. The real problem with this, though, Dick, and I have to say it from the get-go, is we lost 49 wonderful lives less than just a week ago. I don't know when it came in America that we had to politicize these things, not let these bodies be buried before we start tearing the country apart. That was my biggest disappointment in the whole week.
Well, I would agree with you. I think it, Jeff, was complicated by the fact that there is this notion among the hard left that this is some kind of hate crime. Most Americans consider it just a terrorist attack on a bunch of victims, the majority of whom happen to be homosexual. It's still terrorism. It's not necessarily a hate crime. I think that's muddied the waters.
I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a hate crime. I don't know if it's terrorism. I don't know if it's a combination of the two. It's a nut. It's a madman who wanted his 5 minutes of fame, and we don't know when the next one is going to arise. We're getting them all the time. I think that this was the 20th time the president has addressed the nation on this topic in 8 years. This is sick. And it reflects a society that's got some serious problems. And so we really don't know psychologically what motivated him. He can get on his high horse while he's in the act and say and pledge allegiance to ISIS, but we know that ISIS took no responsibility for this crime, or whether or not he just had some anti-phobic, some homophobic sentiments. I mean, we just don't know. All we know is that we had another madman with another automatic weapon able to spray bullets in an open venue, and that it can happen again.
Jennifer, I'm going to address Jeff's point, but I want to go back to something Matt said, which is what the Democratic candidate for the U.S. Senate in Georgia, James Barksdale, the guy with the cap. I like the cap, okay. James Barksdale, Matt's absolutely right. That was very badly underreported. Barksdale said that we ought to pause, step back, and examine the hatred on both sides. Is that a legitimate political reaction to this?
No, and I think all it does is ignore the real problem. The real problem is terrorism, both abroad and domestic. We have a president who does not want to acknowledge the threat. He doesn't want to fully articulate the threat. Instead of rallying the nation around the fact that a terrible tragedy was committed in Orlando and we have innocent victims, he had his own little temper tantrum of a press conference where he, beat the same old drum about gun control and intolerance, and it's not getting to the root of the problem. So we can hide our heads in the sand all we want, but at the end of the day, the national security agencies of the United States have been warning us for years that self-radicalization was going to be a very real threat, and we saw that in Orlando.
I don't want to get off on this because it's not really our province, but I do think that the end of this whole thing, fingers are going to be pointed at the FBI. I think the FBI, having had this fella under questioning twice, dropped the ball somewhere, especially when a gun store owner calls them and says, I got a guy here trying to buy a gun, and I'm not going to sell it to him.
You know, it's funny, Dick. It's not just it's a dropping of the ball, but the finger goes further, and that is to the funding of the FBI and to everyone who has to do this. These people are under immense pressure to try to ferret through these threats to this country, and there are more than people want to admit. That has to be admitted that they exist, and a lot of these people who commit these crimes are on these lists, and so there is both sides have an argument here. Yes, assault weapons came into play again. They're being examined. Donald Trump is even talking about
this was not an assault weapon. Let's emphasize that.
And I also want to make very clear, though, the other side of this is this man did have numerous contacts, it's been established, that were extremely close to those who are radical in their nature. And so this list has to be looked at, and the FBI needs the money to be able to pursue it.
So in the meantime, Donald Trump lands in Atlanta. And it was kind of fun. Here we are. It would have been more fun if this terrorism incident hadn't occurred. But Donald Trump comes in, does a fundraiser, does a rally, talked like Johnny Isaacson. He said our president has not had an effective enough policy against terrorism. And Trump was, I think, greeted by, Matt, you were there, so help me with this. It's my impression that it was establishment Republicans, moneyed Republicans, religious evangelicals, and just plain folks.
Yeah, that's true. I wasn't at the rally, but I was earlier. But the thing that struck me with Trump is that he, as has been the case the few times I've been around him before, when you're with him in private, he's very quiet, he's very calm, he's very solicitous of other people's opinions. That's not the Trump, of course, that you see at these rallies and the like. So in that sense, I think he had a good visit. But, you know, again, this wasn't a great week for Trump. I mean, his numbers weren't great. Now, I will say, Ronald Reagan, 1980, he was down 7 points to Jimmy Carter at this point. George W. Bush was down several points to Kerry, 6 points down at this point in 2004. So polls don't mean a lot right now. But he's making some progress. The question is, will he get his message together in time for July?
And, you know, and there was a message that really wasn't seconded by Republicans and by the surrogates out there who, you know, should be supporting their standard bearer. All of his messages when it came to terrorism were off message. He says that he wants to not allow folks on the watch list to be able to buy guns. This is in contradiction to every congressional vote that Republicans have had, right? Dianne Feinstein's tried to do that on at least 2 occasions, and Republicans have voted it down. Now he says that he wants to do it after this incident. He's all over the lot. He's over in sort of Democratic territory when it comes to the gun issue, the gun control issue. Sounded more like the president than the Republican that we've been hearing about. And so I don't know that who's going to support Trump? Are Republicans going to be behind him at the end of the day? This past week, it didn't appear that they were.
Jennifer, I would suggest that Republicans, regardless of who their nominee is, will be opposed to Hillary Clinton.
Absolutely.
It's a simple call.
That's a big enough motivator for Republicans.
They
no
might
Hillary
stay
Clinton.
Home. You know, you got some folks, got some Bernie supporters who will probably stay home.
Jeff,
I think that you may have some Republicans who would probably stay home.
Let's talk about one more aspect of Trump's visit. It must not go unnoticed. Vince Dooley endorsed him.
Yes.
Now he got Bobby Knight in Indiana. He got Vince Dooley in Georgia. That's pretty important stuff in my view.
That's like gold. You take that and you book it.
For political people like us, Ralph Reed endorsed him. That's important.
Right.
But Vince Dooley trumps all.
Yeah.
All right, we've got to get out. We're not even going to get to Bill Clinton visiting with Jimmy Carter, but I'll find a way to work that in. When we come back, we're going to talk about Baptists and the flag. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
Just in passing, let me note that former President Bill Clinton came to Atlanta this week, too. Met with Jimmy Carter as part of the Clinton Global Initiative. The two of them took to the stage and questioned each other. And it's interesting, given the tenor of the campaign, the two former presidents, Bill Clinton and Jimmy Carter, were just old friends and quite calm. And so there's really not much else to say about that, except to add that Cox, which owns the newspaper and a lot of broadcast outlets, gave $25 million to the Clinton global initiative. Now, given the fact that the FBI is poring over that thing like it was the Kremlin, why would you give $25 million to that? That's just me talking.
Well, we know one thing. They know what they're doing, and they know they won't be on the list, so they don't have to worry about it. I mean, I've given money to the Clintons in the past, so I get both sides. I get to both sides, and I helped, I think, with the library. I don't think there's anything wrong with giving a donation, but I will say this. The real story of this, Dick, was that President Clinton and President Carter were far more moderate in what they had to say than the Democratic standard bearer is going to be.
Thank you. That was what I was trying to say. You said it much better.
Thing. It just tells you again, Bill Clinton is a moderating factor on Hillary Clinton.
All right. So this isn't a big headline item, but it's fascinating to me. We'll segue from the two Baptists, Bill Clinton and Jimmy Carter. And the Southern Baptist Convention, the largest Protestant religious group in the United States, this week had a very civilized debate, from everything I can see, and decided to discourage or end the display of what they call the Confederate flag. It's not the Confederate flag. It is the Confederate battle flag. Anyway, they have decided that they're not going to display that.
Well, it was a little broader than that. I think that they advocated for the.
They're acting for racial harmony.
Well, and for not only the convention won't display it, they don't want anyone to display it. They don't want their congregants, their members, to display it. And it was a very, I think that it was a profound and somewhat historic statement. We knew it was coming. They announced this a couple of months ago, and had every indication that this was going to happen. I think that they want to be as inclusive as they can. And they know that this is the swastika to an awful lot of people, and they don't want that out there. And I think they're trying to come clean with some of their history as well. So it was a good thing to see, and clearly they're one of the winners of the week.
Well, yeah, I just think it's interesting, given all we've been through with the religious wars on the right. That seemed to me, and it was Pastor James Merritt, who's been around Atlanta a long time. He's now in Duluth. I think he was the clincher. He clinched the deal. I've always liked that guy. All right. Back to the more mundane. A study this week based on U.S. Census data will affect what's going to happen in the General Assembly this coming year. It says that Georgia is 37th in per pupil spending in the nation. That's better than being just ahead of Mississippi. 37th isn't terrible.
Well, what's so ironic is over the years, we've talked year after year after year, we're going to spend more money, we're going to do this.
When you were in the legislature, you only led Mississippi.
Well, exactly. So we're moving forward. But it seems like we throw money down a hole, and the results are often different. And let me just point something out that we all know at this table. What part of Georgia's problem, in terms of the way the students perform, are the demographics of the state. We have a state in which we have a lot of folks who live below the level of considered poverty or near poverty. It's very hard in some of these rural counties to bring these folks up. We try.
Rural and urban.
It's rural and urban, and so it's a problem, Jeff, we've been seeing for years, and I don't know that you solve it with money.
But you don't solve it with money.
Jeff, Atlanta's way up there, right above the national average.
Yes. Well, you don't solve the problem with money. I agree with you. And you don't solve it with standardized testing. I think that you solve it by acknowledging your history, and we have a very difficult history when it comes to public education in Georgia, acknowledging where we've gone wrong over the generations and how we can address that and how we can fix it. But without some sort of historical context, you really don't get to the problem.
Jennifer, you have worked in Washington. You know the ways of the Congress. Water wars. This is probably as important a subject as we can talk about on this broadcast regarding the state of Georgia. And Richard Shelby of Alabama, once again, is trying to stick it to Georgia by putting language in there that Congress will referee the water fight among Georgia, Alabama, and Florida.
You know, we hit on this last week. I think this whole situation is going to end up being resolved in mediation. It will end up.
We hope.
I think it's likely. Shelby can put the language in, but you know the situation in Congress right now, not much of anything is getting done, and it's unlikely that that language will end up getting across the finish line in any form or fashion. But it is an ongoing problem, and I think unlike last time, it does seem like both Georgia and Florida want to get this settled peaceably through mediation and not have it blow up into a full-blown legal
that
battle.
would be a change, because we were either in the third or the fourth decade of these lawsuits between the states over the supply and flow of water. And
it's a lawyer full employment act.
It has been a lawyer full employment act, and the lawyers have done very well by it.
And one last thought on it. I think this is where Johnny Isaacson seniority is going to come into play.
Yeah,
Shelby's a powerful senator, but quietly Johnny Isaacson is too. And so I think he can block that language. One last topic that I'm unsure about, because I don't fully understand the scope of it. Georgia Power is going to do away with coal ash ponds, and they're going to move all the coal ash, or sludge I guess it is, to landfills. Is this a significant environmental act, or is it just something to keep people happy?
It's another EPA regulation under the Obama administration that's going to cost us a lot of money. And you can add it to a long list of EPA regulations that have been rolled out under Obama that are going to continue to have economic impact across the broader
kudos
economy.
to Georgia Power, because they're taking a proactive position here. And I think that's the
well, that's what I mean. They seem to have moved before
I think that's exactly
the hammer
right,
came down.
That's right. And they're taking some, and I think they want to be environmentally progressive, even if it does cost a little extra money for ratepayers and for the company itself, and just get on the right side of this issue. You know, that $25 million that Cox contributed was for sustainability, and it's a big issue for everybody, and I think that the energy companies are catching on.
Every company wants to sustain. They want to be sustained.
They want to be sustained.
My company, your company.
Yeah, exactly.
Coca-Cola wants to be sustained after the Philadelphia vote.
We have to get out. I'm kind of waiting. There it is, the streetcars behind us. Okay. When we come back, how about my timing? When we come back, we're going to talk about whether that thing keeps running. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
You know, in one sense, it's somewhat unusual that the Atlanta streetcar is the subject of so much news discussion. After all, no one rides it. So why should we talk about it? Well, we talk about it because it's costing us all money, to the tune of gazillions here. And this week, the state had given the city a deadline, Jeff.
Yes.
Of June 21st or something.
Right.
And the city complied late with 2,500 pages of documents, but no real solutions, and asked the state for more time to consider what other changes it might make, and who might manage the system.
Right. Yeah.
Is that the way you read it?
Yeah, absolutely, because I think that they're looking now for a private sector manager. But they've had a private sector manager, but it was contracted through MARTA. You know, it's been a complicated governance arrangement with the city and MARTA and GDOT. You know, it's been just a little tourist loop so far, with plans for additional phases that will actually take the streetcar someplace, connecting most significantly to the Beltline. But we got to have a little bit of vision when we look at this. And I know that now nobody's riding the streetcar. I think the point at which it goes up Irwin Street to the Beltline, you're going to have a lot of people on the streetcar. And again, these are things that just don't happen overnight. It requires some vision. It requires some planning. Sort of like the Beltline. The Beltline is an investment for the next 25, 50 years and more for the city of Atlanta. And so when you look at the streetcar in that context, you know, if you look at it today, it's one thing. If you look at it 2 decades from now, it's something else. And so by way of comparison, it isn't the first time that a president has done this by way of stimulus, okay? In the 1970s it happened. Detroit got one called the People Mover. And there were pundits sitting around like us now in the 1970s complaining about it, that nobody rode the People Mover. Well, I was in Detroit a couple of months ago, and everybody is now on the People Mover, because it's, you know, you got millennials downtown, you've got the casinos downtown, Greek Town, and it connects into all of these really hot places in downtown Detroit. And the same thing's going to happen to the streetcar. It's just not going to be tomorrow. And I think that GDOT, FTA, the federal agencies are all going to give this time to work. Why? Because they too have a $100 million investment.
Jennifer, it strikes me at $100 million. What Jeff's talking about, the next phase of it would be $500 million.
It's a boondoggle.
And we're not even going up Peachtree. I might look real favorably upon the streetcar if it went from, say, 5 Points to Buckhead, or on up to Oglethorpe University with the original plan. I might love that.
And that would make sense.
Yeah.
Amazing how common sense would I mean, if you look at even the old streetcar maps of Atlanta before everything was torn out, the streetcar went up and down Peachtree Street.
But that's
Why?
not,
It's
but
the
that's
main
not the way
boulevard.
our city works anymore, and it's not the main boulevard anymore. It's just something we have in our
Of course
heads.
it is.
What we
works?
have
Of course
now
it
are
is.
this wonderful connection of in-town neighborhoods, Inman Park, the old Fourth Ward, places where people are, places where millennials are, and where they're going to be 25, 30 years from now when we're not doing this show anymore.
You don't need to walk. You don't need a streetcar to get from the
I'm gonna
old
tell you a
Fourth
secret
Ward to
about
Inman
Jeff.
Park.
I'm gonna tell you a secret about Jeff. He gives this speech a lot. He wants to be 25 again. And he wants to hang out.
He wants to be an
He wants
urban
to hang
hipster.
out on the belt.
Of the three of us, who doesn't want to be 25 again?
Actually, there are a good number of folks out there exercising on the Beltline of all ages. You should go out and check it out.
Let me just quote Phil Kent, who's not here today, but is usually regular. He said he gave kudos to the Beltline. He said he was a doubter of it, but it was beginning to come along just last week. To Jeff's point, it may take a long time for this streetcar to catch on. To your point, these streetcars went in all over the country. Atlanta's not the only place that did it. And they're either going to be booms or busts. And right now, I mean, clearly...
Most of them are busts.
Yeah, but ours is going to be a boom because I think of the Beltline, the easy connectability to the Beltline, and the incredible popularity of this. You got to look at not only the Beltline itself, but the investment around it. It's billions and billions of dollars.
Right,
you've got apartments and condos going up all over the Beltline.
Grab your bike and go. I want to mention this too on the
exactly right.
because I think it's a matter of record. There's also a lot of economic development in Cobb County, Jeff.
Yes.
Specifically at SunTrust Park in that area.
Yes.
And they topped off the stadium this week. Did the old topping off ceremony with a tree and all that and a flag. And the stadium is halfway finished, and they're promising a traffic plan from the Braves and the county in the next couple of weeks. I'm looking forward to that.
And they're punishing all politicians who had anything to do with it.
Well, you wonder. Yeah, you do. Tim Lee's in trouble in that runoff. I think we all agree, but nonetheless, it's going to be a huge deal. Listen to Jeff talk about the Beltline. Well, this is Cobb's Beltline.
Well, I have two thoughts about it. First of all, I think it's a beautiful stadium. I see it every day because I live near there. I think the real concern is the traffic plan. This thing should have been thought out with much greater detail before this thing ever got going, and that's why the problems exist right now for the CEO there, and the transparency issue. That was the big issue. I think the public there feels like they weren't involved. That said, I predict a very close race in this runoff because that Chamber of Commerce crowd can really turn their folks out, and unless Boyce, who is the opponent, can turn his people out, you might just see Lee hold on.
Okay. And by the way, just speaking of elections and runoffs, you're talking about July runoffs. That's what we're all, but not in Sandy Springs. Banana Republic of Sandy Springs has a runoff this week, and you can only vote in one polling place, right, Jennifer?
That's
it's
right.
amazing. It's a city council seat, by the way. It's a special election and a runoff in it, but one polling place, irregular hours.
That sounds like the 1960s in Georgia all over again, right?
There you go. All right, when we come back, winners and losers.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
And we'll begin our winners and losers segment with you, Jeffrey.
Well, thank you. I'm going to make my friend and client, Daniel Halpern, my winner. He is chairman of the Atlanta Housing Authority and the CEO of the Atlanta Restaurant Partners. But he hosted Bill Clinton at his home and had him over for dinner, and some other folks. I wasn't there, but I understand and that a good time was had by also. Daniel is my winner. The other winner has got to be the Southern Baptist
Would that have to do
Convention
with the $6.8 billion renovation that's underway at Hartsfield and his participation in some contracts there?
No, I don't think so at all. Daniel is one of many really solid concessionaires at Hartsfield.
Native American, right?
Yes, actually, he is.
Yeah, okay.
He is.
Right.
Well, yeah, and proudly.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, did I cut you off?
Well, I was just going to mention the Southern Baptist Convention thing, which we've already done. I think that
Jennifer, what you have?
I'm going to name my winner Donald Trump for two reasons. First, he has won over the legendary sports crowd in endorsements. We have Bobby Knight, Tom Brady, Herschel Walker, Mike Tyson, and now Vince Dooley.
Wow.
So He's racking up the legends in the Sports Hall of Fame. And then also Donald Trump, because he has shown us that he has managed to get under Obama's skin in a way that no other politician has. And Obama is reacting to it, and it's interesting to watch. And we saw we saw that unfold this week with what happened in Orlando.
Matthew?
Very quickly, bipartisan today. Ambassador Gordon Giffen, former ambassador to Canada, he ran as a delegate. I mean, this is one of Clinton's best friends. This is Mr. Clinton, along with a few others here in Georgia. He ran as a delegate at the Democratic Convention here, won. He's going, but he still has it in it. Congratulations, Gordon. And then Raina Casey and Brandon Phillips, who put together the Trump fundraiser with very little time to go. They raised over $1 million. Congrats to them as well.
All right, and I will go on to the other side of the aisle and make as one of my winners David Scott, the congressman from Georgia, a Democrat, who told Obama to get shaken, get off the spot, and do something about terrorism. So David Scott, an old friend, would be my winner there. The other winner, Chick-fil-A, which is always closed on Sunday, opened last Sunday in Orlando to help the victims of that awful terror attack there. We'll see you next week on the Georgia Gang.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program